Story 1. Growing up in a quiet little town, the kind where everyone knew your name, I spent most of my time with my best friend, Ryan. We met in the first grade and hit it off instantly. Ryan had this infectious energy, a knack for cracking jokes that could light up even the dullest moments. When he talked to you, it felt like you were the only person in the world that mattered. For years, we were inseparable. Whether we were building forts deep in the woods, staying up all night battling video game bosses, or plotting grand adventures we'd take as grown-ups. Ryan's family always seemed a bit different from the rest of the town. His parents were reserved to the point of being reclusive, rarely mingling with anyone else. They lived in an old, sprawling house on the edge of town, surrounded by dense woods. While my parents were the type to throw neighborhood barbecues, Ryan's family kept their doors firmly shut. None of that mattered to me, though. Their home became my second home, and even though his parents were distant, they were always polite and welcoming. Looking back, there was something peculiar about Ryan that I didn't pay much attention to at the time. He had an unusual fixation on food. It wasn't just a love for eating or cooking. It was something deeper, almost obsessive. As kids, he'd invent games that revolved around food, like running a pretend restaurant or creating imaginary feasts. By the time we were teenagers, his fascination had grown into a full-blown passion. He'd talk endlessly about exotic dishes and rare ingredients, things I assumed were just part of his quirky personality. One summer, when we were 16, Ryan's obsession took a strange turn. He invited me over, excited to share a dish he'd been working on. He wouldn't tell me what it was, only that it was a special recipe he'd perfected. When I arrived, the kitchen was filled with an incredible aroma, rich and savory, making my stomach growl. He handed me a bowl of stew. The meat was tender, flavorful, but there was something about it I couldn't quite place. When I asked what it was, Ryan just smirked and said, "It's a family secret." At the time, I didn't think much of it. Ryan had always been a little eccentric, and I figured this was just another one of his quirks. Over the next few weeks, he kept inviting me over to try new dishes. Each one was more elaborate than the last, and every time he refused to tell me what I was eating. My unease started to grow, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings. After all, he was my best friend. By the time we were seniors in high school, things had gotten even stranger. Ryan became more secretive, even with me. He'd disappear for hours or sometimes days, never explaining where he'd been. When I pressed him, he'd just shrug and change the subject. Then there was the basement. His family's house had this old, creepy basement that was always locked. One night, I noticed Ryan had a key. When I asked him about it, he grinned and said, "Maybe I'll show you someday." I couldn't shake my curiosity. A few weeks later, while Ryan wasn't paying attention, I slipped the key out of his pocket. Late that night, once everyone was asleep, I crept down to the basement. The door creaked loudly as I opened it, and the smell of damp earth hit me as I descended. At first, it seemed like any other basement, cluttered with old furniture, dusty boxes, and tools. But then I saw a door at the far end, slightly ajar with flickering light spilling out. My heart pounded as I approached. Pushing the door open, I froze in place. The room looked like some kind of grotesque kitchen. Knives and cutting boards were neatly arranged, along with meat grinders and other equipment. On the counter sat a slab of meat that didn't look like anything I'd ever seen before. Then I noticed the freezer, a large industrial model secured with a heavy padlock. Driven by a mix of fear and curiosity, I grabbed a crowbar from a nearby shelf and forced the lock open. What I found inside made my stomach turn. The freezer was packed with vacuum-sealed bags of meat, each one labeled with dates and names. Names I recognized. Names of people from our town who had gone missing over the years. My hands shook as I stumbled back, horrified. That's when I heard Ryan's voice. "I told you it was a family recipe," he said, standing in the doorway with a butcher's knife in hand. His expression was calm, almost casual, but his eyes were ice cold. The next moments were a blur. My body moved on instinct, shoving past him and sprinting up the stairs. I didn't stop running until I was home, where I locked every door and window. I wanted to tell someone, but who would believe me? Ryan was the town's golden boy, adored by everyone. And what proof did I have? I'd broken into his basement. He could easily turn the story against me. The next day at school, Ryan acted like nothing had happened. He greeted me with his usual grin, but his eyes told a different story. They were watching, calculating. I avoided him as much as I could, but he seemed to be everywhere, always wearing that unsettling smile. I felt like I was being hunted. After graduation, I couldn't take it anymore. I left town without looking back, cutting ties with everyone, including Ryan. For years, I tried to convince myself that it had all been some horrible misunderstanding, or maybe a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. But deep down, I knew the truth. Then, last week, a letter arrived. There was no return address, but I recognized the handwriting immediately. Inside was a single sheet of paper with 3 chilling words. Family dinner soon. I don't know how he found me, and I don't want to know. But one thing is certain, Ryan hasn't forgotten. And neither have I. Story 2. When I was 7, my dad pulled me out of school, saying he wanted to teach me at home. I never fully understood why, especially since I'd always done well in class. But what struck me as strange was that we never actually did any schoolwork. Instead, I spent most of my days sleeping because my dad kept me up at night to play hide and seek. It wasn't the usual kind of hide and seek either. I never got to seek. My job was always to hide and hide well, as my dad would put it. Every night, I'd find a new spot to tuck myself away, and my dad would roam the house trying to find me. I had this one secret spot in my closet that even he didn't know about. At the very back corner was a small door leading into a crawl space. Over time, I made it my own little hiding haven. I brought in an electric lantern, some blankets, a cooler with snacks, a stack of comic books, and my Game Boy to pass the time. No matter how hard my dad tried, he never managed to find me. He'd growl and snarl like a wild animal, trying to scare me, but I just stayed quiet. Dad always said if I got caught, we wouldn't be able to play anymore. Last night, my Uncle Jack and Aunt Sarah, my dad's brother and his wife, came over for dinner. While we were chatting after eating, I casually mentioned our nightly hide-and-seek games. My dad's face went pale, and Uncle Jack gave me this strange look. "What do you mean you're playing hide-and-seek tonight?" my uncle asked. "Every night, Dad and I play, but he's terrible at it. He never finds me," I said, laughing. "Go get your pajamas on, Adam," my dad said sharply, his tone suddenly different. As I walked out of the room, the atmosphere felt heavy. From my bedroom, I could hear Dad and Uncle Jack arguing, their voices low but tense. The conversation ended with the front door slamming, and then I heard my dad's heavy footsteps heading up the stairs. "Did Uncle Jack and Aunt Sarah leave?" I asked when he walked into my room. "Yeah, they had to get going," Dad said, pulling me into a long hug. "Is it time to play?" I asked as I pulled on my pajamas. "In a few minutes," he replied, sitting down on my bed. "But listen, Adam, this might be the last time we play for a while. Uncle Jack and Aunt Sarah want you to stay with them for a bit." I didn't fully understand, but I remembered Mom and Dad having a similar conversation before Mom died. Back then, they talked about me living with Uncle Jack too. So I didn't argue. I just hugged Dad, trying to hold back tears. If this was going to be our last game, I was determined not to get caught. Dad left the room and headed to the basement, where he always started counting. 1, 2, 3, 4. His voice echoed faintly. He always gave me until 100 to hide. I crawled into my closet and slipped through the crawl space door, settling into the damp, dusty hideout. The lantern cast a soft glow, and I made myself comfortable, flipping through my latest comic. I was finishing an issue of The Incredible Hulk when I heard my dad enter my bedroom. I quickly turned off the lantern and listened as he searched the closet, shifting hangers and sniffing like a dog. He let out low growls and heavy breathing, and it took everything I had not to laugh. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed from outside, and Uncle Jack's voice boomed through the house. "Adam, stay where you are and don't come out," he shouted. I heard Dad bolt from my room and head toward the stairs. Uncle Jack's voice followed. "Mark, this doesn't have to end like this. We can fix it. Look at Sarah." She doesn't even change anymore. I didn't understand what he meant, but before I could think too much about it, loud, sharp bangs erupted, like fireworks going off inside the house. Morning came, and the house was eerily silent. I pushed the crawlspace door open and climbed back into my room. After freshening up, I went downstairs to find the place empty. A note sat on the kitchen table in Dad's handwriting. "Adam, you're growing into such a strong young man. I need you to be even stronger now and go live with Uncle Jack for a while. I love you, son, and I'm sorry this has to happen. Dad." At the bottom, he'd written Uncle Jack's phone number. I cried, of course I did. My dad had left me with no explanation. As I looked up, Uncle Jack stood in the doorway, a rifle slung over his shoulder. "Finish your breakfast, kiddo. We've got to bury an old wolf I took care of last night," he said. The rest of the day, we dug a hole and buried chopped up pieces of what Uncle Jack called the wolf. I thought I saw Dad's wedding ring on the ground at one point, but it got knocked into the hole when Jack picked up one of the wolf's paws. "Uncle Jack, when can I see Dad again?" I asked, trying not to cry. "I don't know, Adam. Hopefully someday," he said as we filled in the grave. Going back to school after being out for a year felt great, and Jack and Sarah took good care of me. But lately, Jack has been sleeping out in the barn, and his pretend wolf howls keep me awake at night. I overheard him and Sarah talking about how it might be time to play hide and seek again. Story 3. My name is Jake, and I'm a 17-year-old high school student. I grew up in a family that never had any issues, financial or otherwise. Life was pretty easy, and I never felt the need to earn my own money. But by the time I turned 17, things changed a little. All my friends had part-time jobs, and they were using their paychecks to buy stuff for themselves and learn a thing or two about working. It didn't take long for the peer pressure to catch up with me. I felt like the odd one out, never having had a job before. So I started looking. I wanted something that paid decently, enough to buy games and other things without having to ask my dad for cash every month. That's when I came across a job listing on Craigslist. The ad read, "Position open for a night security guard at name omitted, S Private Zoo. Earn $150 a night. Work 6 hours a day, 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Applicants must be 20 or younger for reasons to be disclosed. A non-disclosure agreement, NDA, must be signed." It seemed a bit odd, but I was intrigued. The ad came from some millionaire who wanted someone to guard his private collection of exotic animals. I called the number listed and spoke with a man named Gordon. The phone interview was straightforward at first, but then he started asking weird questions. "Are you scared of loud noises? How tall are you? How old are you? Can you follow instructions to the letter?" I answered honestly, and to my surprise, he told me I was hired. I asked about the strange questions, but Gordon just said, "You'll understand when you get here." He directed me to fill out an online form with my name, address, and other details. Something about it didn't sit right with me, so I pushed back. "I'm not comfortable working in a place you won't even tell me about," I said, but none of the other jobs I found were as appealing. I spent the rest of the evening debating whether to take the job and finally fell asleep around 2 a.m. When I woke up, everything was wrong. I wasn't in my room. I was in a strange, sterile white space. The bed, the walls, the door, everything was white. There was a watch strapped to my wrist, displaying the time, my heart rate, and a line labeled Lifeline. I opened the door to find myself in a long corridor lined with massive cages. The first creature I saw made my heart stop. It looked like a tiger, but it was enormous. At least 17 feet long and 6 feet tall with light green fur. When it saw me, it let out a deafening roar that shook the ground. A plaque near the cage read, "Prototype 1, Maxis." Maxis is a genetically enhanced Bengal tiger, one of name omitted, S prized creations, known for its deafening roar and strength 6 times that of a normal tiger. Height, 6 feet. Length, 17 feet. Weight, 4 to 5 times the original. Before I could finish reading, Maxis roared again, louder this time. My ears were ringing as I ran back to the room. On the table inside, I noticed a pair of headphones and a piece of paper. I picked it up, and this is what it said. Welcome, new employee. Let's clear a few things up. Yes, you'll be paid. No, you're not trapped here forever. You'll be brought here every night from 12 a.m. to 6 a.m. Meanwhile, a shape-shifting entity will replace you in the real world. Don't try to tell anyone about this, they won't believe you. Just follow these rules to survive and ensure no creatures escape. The list of rules was terrifying. Always wear the headphones. They'll block out dangerous sounds. Conduct a check on all 12 prototypes every hour. Skipping checks will unlock all the cages. You've been warned. If prototype 10, Stygian, starts thrashing its cage, run to your room, lock the door, and turn on every light. Can only harm you in darkness. If you see someone walking around the zoo, shoot them. Pistol is in your nightstand drawer. The weapon is useless against the prototypes but works on this individual. Fail to shoot him within 2 minutes, and you'll be paralyzed, tortured, and killed in the most gruesome way imaginable. If alarms go off, it means a prototype has escaped. Open Maxis's cage using the button under your bed. He'll handle the situation. To lure him back, use the barrel of beef in your closet. If Maxis loses to another prototype, shoot yourself. Without Maxis, there's no hope of survival. The prototypes are less aggressive toward people under 20. Consider it your only advantage. If prototype 5 Magenta turns her gills blue and makes eye contact, look away and put on the headphones. She'll sing an enchanting song to lure you into helping her escape, and then she'll kill you. Never fall asleep during your shift. If you do, you'll wake up inside one of the cages, facing certain death. If you smell rotting fish or garbage, follow the scent. Enter the prototype's cage, stare it down, and don't flinch. Fear will make them attack. Confidence keeps you safe. At 6 a.m., you'll pass out and wake up in your bed with $150 in your pocket. This will continue until you turn 20. After that, you'll be left alone. As I finished reading, I caught a foul stench wafting into my room.